course down in Jamestown. There's over 500 people. It was oversubscribed, chaired by Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, and co-sponsored by Mountain Counties Water Resources Association and Aqua JPIA. And although the agenda was more fire than water, there was a full, there was integration of those concepts, which in talking to representatives of both those organizations in the future, we'd really like to highlight. Then after the session on Thursday, on Friday, there was a series of field tours, and I was able to attend the McColney Amador Calaveras Forest Health and Resilience project on the work they've been doing in terms of watershed protection, basically in that area adjoining our watershed. And it was just interesting to see the collaborations, breaking down of institutional barriers that they've been doing both at the task force and at this field tour. And it just shows how much can be accomplished when people break out of their shells and work together, identifying common goals. And to me, it was well worth it. It was content rich. And so I look forward to further things, meetings. The next meeting is in Sacramento later in the year. So that was my update.
Thank you. Director Dwyer, anything to report? Director Ben? Director Day? Okay. We'll move on to approve the consent calendar. There are some... I did. It keeps going off. Is not mine? Yeah, it's been turned on. Somebody turns it off.
No, it's Dwyer's.
Light's on, but it goes off. Now it goes off. Okay. And now the phone. Yeah. It keeps going off on its own.
Yeah.
I'll use his.
Sure.
Okay, we have nothing to Director Dwyer, you have a lot to say. So anyway, we'll move on to the consent calendar. There are items to be pulled from the consent calendar at request. Item number 3, Dr. Mann.
Yeah, number 3 and number 5, please, for the purposes of my recusal. My company, Goldbud Farms, engages in a custom contract with Matt Veerkamp Vineyards for farming services, but Matt Veerkamp Vineyards shares common ownership with Doug Veerkamp Incorporated. So I'll be recusing myself from those items.
All right.
Move consent.
Move consent, absent
5.
items 3 and 5.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay, so it's been okay,
Yeah.
Director Dwyer first and second, Director Dwyer. Okay. Any other items from the public? Questions?
We are now taking public comment on the approval of the consent calendar as amended, minus items 3 and 5.
Right.
If any members of the public would like to speak regarding approval of the consent calendar, please follow the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. And President Anzini, it does not appear that any members of the public are wishing to speak on approval of the consent calendar. I believe we are ready for the vote. Would you like me to call the vote?
Yes.
We have a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended, minus items 3 and 5, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer. We are ready for the vote.
Thank you. Board members vote?
Directors Penn, Dwyer, sorry. Let me reset that. Because
I'm attempting to vote.
Yes, sorry. I got ahead of myself. Please vote. If you could re-vote, Director Dwyer. Sorry.
There we go.
And Directors Penn, Dwyer, Mansfield, and Ziti, and Day voting aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so now we will be voting on
Move items 3 and 5.
Thank you.
Second.
Great. Okay, it's been moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Penn to approve items number 3 and 5.
We're going to take those as a single item.
As a single item.
Okay. If members of the public would like to speak to the board regarding approval of consent items 3 and 5, now is your opportunity to comment. Please follow the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. And President Anzini, it does not appear that anyone is wishing to speak regarding consent calendar items 3 and 5. I believe we're ready for the vote. Would you like me to call the vote?
Yes.
We have a motion to approve consent calendar items 3 and 5, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Penn. Please vote. Directors Penn, Dwyer, Anzini, and Day voting aye. Director Mansfield recusing himself from this item, and the motion passes.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to information items, and by privilege, we're requested to move El Dorado Water Agency up to the first number. Item number 12 will become now item 10. So here's our opportunity to be presented by the El Dorado Water Agency. Rebecca?
Hey, no, you're fine. Testing out using the mouse. This is great. Good morning, directors, staff. I don't know if there's any public here also, but online. My name is Rebecca Guo. I'm the general manager of the El Dorado Water Agency. And so today, really just providing an informational overview of the water agency. We get into a little bit more detail than normal about, I'm going to present more of our 1959 Act and the authorities and roles and responsibilities, and then how we're going about implementing that. So it might be a little bit more text heavy than, there we go, clicking, okay, than normal. So 1959 was when we were established. It was by an act of the California State Legislature. And through there, couple dozen pages long of our authorities, but I'm highlighting a couple of the areas where we are working on, and especially in our roles and responsibilities in terms of the water side of things, just to show kind of the larger scope of the water agency. So for example, Chapter 96-11, acquiring sufficient water. So water supply. We're also able to generate and sell hydroelectric power. We're able to help manage and control flood and stormwaters, both inside and outside of the agency. So any water that enters the county, originates in the county, or leaves the county really is areas that we can engage in terms of water resources, which being in the headwaters is almost all the water, or it is. Also looking at water runoff into creeks and streams, use of reclaimed water, looking at contamination, pollution, and conducting water resources and investigations. So that means being able to engage with state, federal, local agencies to negotiate with them and do planning with them. And so really it's focused around this county-wide water resources planning. So our jurisdictional boundaries are commensurate with the County of El Dorado. And so we're able to help support the realization of the county general plan in all the different ways of water resources. So beyond just maybe water supply or stormwater, it's really that true integrated, what we like to call water resources planning. Maybe I don't know. Thank you. I don't know. And so just about the need to form the water agency, the legislature noted two, I think, things that I wanted to flag to you. One is that there are multiple agencies with similar powers. So because we are unique in our county, they recognize that it's okay for similar or different distinct agencies to have similar powers in one way or another. Not that all of our authorities overlap with any one entity, but there are areas of crossover. And so how do we really respect those roles and responsibilities as individual agencies as we work together and help move each other forward? But I think the large part about what the legislature, why they formed us, is in that Chapter 96, Section 103, is that they identified that water problems need countywide water conservation, flood control, and development of water resources. And so really being able to take that, what I'd like to say, like a bird's eye, 30,000-foot elevation view of things, looking both now and into the future about where's water resources, whether it's water supply, stormwater, hydropower, reclaimed water, water quality, headwaters management, and being able to see where are those things, where are different, vulnerabilities within our county, and how do we help to address some of those. And so the legislature found that, there's a lot of different agencies with different powers, whether it's water supply or even, with the county, they have different stormwater requirements that they need to meet, or cities have that, and that they are unable alone to be able to economically develop something for our county, and so that's why we were created to help that. And so just from a water supply side of things, I thought I'd show, help to demonstrate the complexity of our county. We have 4 urban water purveyors in our county. I'm sure you could guess what colors those are because you see EID in there. So those are the darker shades. So El Dorado Irrigation District, Georgetown Divide Public Utility District, and then in the Tahoe side, South Tahoe and Tahoe City PUDs. But also we have 136 small water systems. And so those are the medium-sized, different colored dots. They range from anywhere, community water systems, so people who actually live there full-time or most of the full-time, anywhere down to state small water systems with 5 connections or less. We also have over 3,600 domestic wells, and depending on who you are, sometimes that number ranges a lot higher. So, as you could see, groundwater and surface water and just water supply in this county is very complicated. And so as El Dorado Water Agency, we look at this entire picture. The urban water purveyors on the west slope relying on surface water. In the Tahoe Basin, that's predominantly groundwater. And then in terms of the small water systems, and then of course domestic wells, those are predominantly groundwater based. And in the west slope, that is fractured rock aquifers. And so that's where, we see a large vulnerability. No one's able to really map out without probably millions of dollars what the fractured rock system may look like underneath. And it's very highly susceptible to different weather conditions and patterns. It really relies on that, traditional snowpack and melt that we used to see, which we don't see as much anymore. So these are all the different areas, at least from the water supply side of things, that we look at. In terms of governance, because I know that was brought up the last time I was here, as of 2002, we have a 5-member board of directors. So it's 3 El Dorado County Board of Supervisors. Historically, and actually, I think over the last 20 years, it's always been districts 2, 3, and 4. Those areas are the ones that we like to call covering a lot of the OCA or other county areas. And so if you think back to I guess I could move back to the map, those are the areas outside of the purveyors. Those are a lot of the folks, the small water systems, domestic wells, who don't have that redundancy in planning. They don't often have redundancy of supplies, being able to pull from different areas. And so they're especially vulnerable, and they don't have the staff to be able, actually most don't have staff, it's volunteers if anything, to be able to think through long-term planning for their water resources. So 3 County Board of Supervisors, and then also 1 West Slope Purveyor Representative and 1 Tahoe Basin. So on the West Slope, it's, EID, Georgetown Divide, and Grizzly Flats. It does specify in our legislation that 1 representative shall be filled by a director by EID every other 4-year term, but there is no mandatory rotation among the West Slope purveyors. Similarly, in the Tahoe, it rotates in theory between South Tahoe and Tahoe City, but once again, there is no mandatory rotation. Every 4 years, whoever is on, tap to be able to do what they tell us. And so that's really how it works. Currently, I know there were questions about South Tahoe being on our board. It's because they work with Tahoe City PUD, and they decide who wants to serve on our board every other 4 years, and then they let us know. And so how do we go about starting to implement those roles and responsibilities that are in our authorizing act? Here is our mission: ensuring El Dorado County has adequate and affordable water through collaboration to support economic prosperity, watershed health, and the rural agricultural way of life, both for today and in the future. And so just a couple of distinguishments from us and water retailers. And right, we don't retail water. That is something that we were precluded to in our existing legislation. Really, our primary goal is that integrated water resources management, whether it's water supply, stormwater, hydropower, reclaimed water. How does all these different aspects of how water is used, what are those within the county, and how do we make sure that it's, you know, adequate and affordable and sustainable for now and future? Looking at the countywide perspective, focusing on the general plan land use capacity, and kind of all of that, we are charged by County Ordinance 5096 to develop a countywide plan for resilient water future. And so our countywide plan is our Water Resources Development Management Plan, which I know we have some staff that were involved in that. But what do we mean in terms of the general plan vision at land capacity? In case if you love land use designations, this is our simplified version of it in terms of water, right? So if you think about land use designations, typically you'd be able to distinguish between single family versus multifamily residential, ag lands versus rural lands, open space. And in terms of water, though, we've colored it into two different colors, and that's the brighter green area and the orange. Everywhere else is outside of the county's land use designations, meaning it's federal, private timber, some state lands. And so we look at the orange color, which is what you would call your municipal industrial. I would say urban, but we're actually a rural community, so maybe rural or residential use. And that's in the fact that we hope that everyone takes showers throughout the year, right? The water usage is somewhat more constant. Maybe, okay, yes, your grass, you'll see a spike in that over the summertime, but a relatively stable pattern throughout the year versus ag, there really is that larger influx of water during the growing season and summer months. And so that's how we've looked at water in two different aspects when we look at long-term planning. And so, just something to mention, right, in the rural agricultural area, so this green rural ag use, about 35% of it, the green areas, are within a purveyor boundary. 65% is that OCA, the other county areas, so outside, likely within a lot of sphere of influences of others, but outside of it. For the urban residential use, that is flip-flopped, so about 67% is by existing purveyors, about 33% is outside. And so just to give you a little bit of perspective in terms of where is the general plan showing different water uses, and not to say that we're saying all of this land is going to develop by a certain date or even at any point, but looking at what is that realm of possibilities, and are we making sure that our water resources are sustainable for that? And so as mentioned, our countywide plan per the ordinance is what we call our Water Resources Development Management Plan. So helps us to look at where is the county going, where is their vision, and do we have the water resources to be able to support that? Recognizing that economic development relies on a lot of different aspects, not just water resources, right? There's transportation, broadband, access to healthcare, et cetera. But making sure that water side of it is being planned for. Mostly graphical, lots of maps in there. If you like maps, I definitely recommend you look at it. Collaboratively developed. I know, not to call out John, but he, as you took on the new role after Mr. Mueller was retiring, he was able to participate a little bit into this, and this was adopted by our board, or at least the policies associated by that, in October of last year. And so in that plan, we identified 7 vulnerabilities, and so those are these gray areas. And so we look at it both from the sides of the West Slope challenges and Tahoe, because they are very distinct and separate, right? Tahoe, drought problems may not be so much of an issue, having a large water basin there, but I think it's different on this side. But there are some overlaps in terms of wildfire risk and what does that impact on water resources. So, we look at, is there enough water supply to meet future demands and existing demands, whether you use groundwater or surface water, or you're a small water system or a large purveyor? What are your vulnerabilities during droughts, whether it's not enough water supply or curtailments, right? Things that you have no control over. loss of water supply due to other practices, such as wildfires or lack of practices. What are the long-term water quality impacts due to wildfires? Water quality impacts due to stormwater runoff, limited groundwater resources. That's more on the west slope than Tahoe, and then vulnerability to flooding. And that's something that we've been seeing, right? I think after 2020, there's been almost an emergency, federally declared emergency declaration over 4 years, I believe. And so you talk to people, it's like, well, no wonder everyone was tired in the county. It's been just disaster after disaster, right? You had the Caldor fire, and then the next year was the Mosquito fire, and then we had the storm flooding. And so all these large things have been hitting our county, and what does that mean in terms of water resources? And so that's really where we've been working with purveyors, county, RCDs, and others to be able to see how do we help manage that. And so looking at all those challenges, we did identify 11 different what we call resource management strategies to help identify and address them. And those are ones where we look at who are our different partners, what are their roles and responsibilities, what are ours, do we help to lead some of these areas, are we just there to help facilitate, bring people together, or is it really a supporting function of the agency? Other agencies are the ones taking the lead. We just provide support, whether it's through advocacy or other areas. And so through that plan, we identified 5 different implementation programs, and you know, as expected, one project doesn't neatly fall into one bucket. I wish it did, but it doesn't. So a lot of what we do falls into multiple categories, but we have our governance and partnerships, so that's working together, and I'll show a couple examples on the next slide. We have our water security, so that's really making sure we have enough water supplies. And watershed management, I think with our recent wildfires, that's something that has really been, you know, pushed to the forefront of how do we make sure that we protect our watersheds so that it protects our infrastructure from burning. It protects our water quality, so we're not having to, you know, have increased treatment or other issues with O&M. And then assistance and innovation, how do we have innovative ideas to help be able to address these challenges, and then communication and advocacy. So I won't go through, you know, all of our different initiatives. I just want to highlight a couple of them just to, you know, provide the board with just a little bit of an understanding of the different roles that we play. For example, under our governance and partnership, we are the Groundwater Sustainability Agency for the Tahoe Valley South Subbasin that's outside of STPUD service area. So we do help with SGMA compliance there in the annual reporting. In terms of water security, going after water rights, which we've done with EID in the past, and we're currently working on one, but also drought planning. Per Senate Bill 552, counties had to develop small county drought water shortage plan for small water systems. County doesn't have staff to be able to do that. They don't look at that. And so through an agreement with them, we developed that study for them. Watershed management, we help facilitate Headwaters Connect, a watershed group, to look at how do we help to address these large-scale watershed issues. Assistance and innovation, we help administer grants. For example, once again, like the county, they received money from ARPA. I know EID got some funds for that to be able to complete work. We help to administer that, at least for the water-related projects. We also have our GIS portal, which we use quite often. It's amazing how many EID customers we get calling us saying, hey, we have a water problem. It's like, well, wait, where do you live? And so you could type in your address and see who's your purveyor or small water system. And so then we could direct them to the correct person. And then communication advocacy, I think that's where we have our plenary for water. How do we bring people together to talk about large issues, but also how do we advocate and work with others in the state, federal. We also do Farm Day we have a joint booth with EID for, I don't know, probably decades now, but I'm not quite sure how long it's been. And so this is kind of our wide variety of things. Yes, water supply, you know, watershed management, stormwater, it's all in there. So it's a fun way to be able to look at, you know, what are the different challenges that we see, whatever aspect of water it is. Is it a resource? A lot of people think of it as a hazard when there's too much of it. And so, yeah, that's really just the overview of our agency, and wanted to open it up to questions to the board or public. But.
No, thank you.
Yeah, great.
Before you go, so most of the counties have a water agency, correct?
Yeah.
Have a, no, I wouldn't say most of the counties have a water
Okay.
agency. Yeah.
So, and what was the, you know, I saw the uniqueness. I know Placer County's got a water agency in Yuba and things like that. Any context on, you know, what was the driver of, I mean, you mentioned the slides. I'm just curious, you know, it says El Dorado County is unique. Well, we're similar to the other mountain counties. I'm just curious if there's any insight.
Maybe.
From 1959.
Yeah.
Well, that was about negative 30 years. No, yes. So I can't speak to exactly why folks back in 1959 thought that it was, but I guess based on what, you know, we read through our act is that I think El Dorado County was being proactive there, right?
Mm-hmm.
They noticed that we have conditions that are different than other folks, and we need to make sure that we're investing in it. And so that's really why I would think they would have done it.
And projections on well failure for this coming year. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on tenterhooks.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Have you done any work on that?
No, unfortunately, the fractured rock groundwater is really hard to be able to understand. I mean, through our work with our irrigated management systems that we have, you know, we provide irrigation recommendations, and we definitely have folks that say, this would be great, we'd love to be able to water this much, but then we'd have to turn off our wells for a week afterwards to be able to let it recharge. And so, you know, that's just an example. I know that, you know, there's not a lot of good data within the county to be able to see during drought periods what's the number of well deepenings or new wells having to be able to be, you know, permits being extracted. And so those are all ways that we're working with the county, especially after that Senate Bill 552 was passed, to be able to see, are there ways that we're able to better understand the vulnerability of those domestic wells. Yeah. And
then I sat in on, actually I think on gold panning at the 1848 at 515 Main. They had an open house. I walked in, and one of the guys who was talking about actually running into lead and mercury in the streams, you know, left over as a legacy of mining. And I really, I figured, you know, it's been 100 years or so, and, you know, I know, so I was just curious if there was any studies or of the extent contamination of the streams from the legacy of gold mining and other, you know, previous activities?
None since my, you know, over the last 10 years probably that the water agency did, but that would be interesting to know if we've looked at that in the past.
I mean, cause the guy's saying, oh, you know, I was out in the streams doing some, you know, gold mining and, you know, panning, and he comes across actual elemental mercury. I'm going, whoa. So that made me take note. When's your next plenary?
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably next year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. For
Just
our
curious.
board policy, we have at least one a year, and so we already had ours for this year. So
Okay.
probably spring next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation. I hope everybody digested this information. I have one question, and maybe that's, it's an odd question. How many staff members do you manage? Yeah,
So at El Dorado Agency, we're small but mighty. There is myself, soon to be 2 technical on the side of things, so water resources principals, a business service operator, and then a part-time admin. So 4.5 full-time equivalents.
Okay, so your technical people, what is that part of it? Is it just engineering?
So it's just
or
water resources planning. So not necessarily engineers, more in the technical or science fields at least, or hydrogeology. So we do, because we don't actually use any of our funds, or we're precluded from using our funds for construction, right? It is more that wider, long-term water resources planning.
So no infrastructure construction funding?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so the other question about the wells. All right, when you said you had a portal that people can log into to find out who their purveyor is.
Yeah.
The question I guess I have is people with wells who are only on that, you have them identified, of course.
Yeah, so with the county, right, every time you drill a well, you have to have a well permit, and so there is that data publicly available, yes.
But you do have that information.
Yeah.
And there's 130 wells?
No, 3,600?
Oh, why did I say?
136 small water systems.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay.
And would you like me to take public comment on this item? We are now seeking public comment on informational item 12 regarding the El Dorado Water Agency. We will first take public comment from the room. And we will next take public comment from those participating virtually. If you would like to comment regarding informational item 12, please follow the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. And it does not appear anyone is wishing to speak on informational item 12. I believe we are ready to move to informational item 10.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to item number 10. And our distinguished engineer, Mr. Muter. Did I pronounce that wrong?
All right. Let's see here. You got it? All right. There we go. All right. Carrie Muchler, I'm the hydroelectric manager for the district. Coming before the board today just to kind of go over our powerhouse penstock and some of the things going on with that. No Yuba Water Agency issues. But we'll cover some of our past and what we've done, so we'll go over some of that. And, you know, that's the summary of the issue for today, is the board knows that the Colgate penstock had a rupture. It's been in the news, and so we're coming before the board just to discuss what we're doing with our penstock and some of the issues with it. So background, the powerhouse and the penstock were both, likes to jump. There we go. Maybe, don't breathe. Again, powerhouse and the penstock were both constructed in 1923, so we just celebrated our 100 year with that facility. They are 3.5 miles long, and it is the key component of our hydroelectric project, the Project 184. So when we leave Forebay, the pipe diameter is around 60 inches. When we get down to the powerhouse, we neck that down to an 8-inch diameter pipe. The low pressure side of the penstock is the spiral welded pipe, and the high pressure is the hammer forge welded steel pipe. Our elevation drop is 1,920 feet, which delivers about 830 PSI at the nozzle. So quite a bit of force going in there. I wouldn't recommend sticking your hand in there. There's a surge tower in between right there that is used for emergencies. It's 254 feet tall and 18 feet in diameter. And I've got some pictures I'll be showing as we go through some of this.
Those are great pictures.
And that, so you can kind of get a feel for what we've done. And then, as most everybody knows, we took possession in 1999, but we're doing work with PG&E as early as 1996 after the floods to make sure that we did our due diligence before we did take possession of the project. All right, so kind of an aerial view as we kind of step through here. This is looking south. Up here at the north, you can see Forebay right here. This is the borrow area from the Forebay Dam project that we had a few years ago. This is the penstock trail. Kind of goes down to here. Down here is our powerhouse, the South Fork of the American River. And then you can see through some of the trees here, Forebay Road as it winds through right there.
And Carrie, So I presume the low pressure is when it's running along the ridge, and then as it dips down, that's
Yep.
the demarcation with the high pressure.
Yep, and we're going to go over kind of that demarcation as we're going to step through this right now, right through that. So as you pointed out, low pressure side from Forbay, till we get to this point right in here where, and the Moon Lane is where we transition. So the majority of our penstock is on the low pressure side of things. And kind of an example of how we go through right here. Most of it's got a bench that we can get to and provide the access. Then we come to where we transition to the high pressure side. This is the surge tower. This is where we quote unquote burp water in case of an emergency. If something were to emergency shut on the high side, this is the energy dissipator to allow that. Think of a big, huge water hammer that would come through. That's what will dissipate that energy.
Like burping a baby.
Exactly. Except it'll be a little wetter when you get done with this one.
Carrie, I think we should paint NASA. just for fun.
But yeah, let's not try and make it a missile. And then, on the left, as you go through, I've kind of incorporated some of our older pictures in the construction as we go through here. The next step, our high pressure side. I know some of the board members have been through out onto this side. Very steep section. This is the old rail line that was used to construct the high pressure side of things. And we'll get into a little bit more with that in another slide. And then again, we'll transition down to our powerhouse. So the maintenance that we typically do, this is our routine maintenance. We are able to monitor the penstock via SCADA. And so that's done 24/7. It's part of our powerhouse crew. They keep an eye on that as well as on our construction side. We also perform a weekly check on the upper and lower butterfly as well as the powerhouse. There's a certain amount of steps that we go through to make sure all the equipment is working properly. And then every 2 weeks, our staff will hike the whole entire 3.5 miles. We'll go down and we'll check every bit of the penstock, except during adverse weather conditions, like about a month ago when we got that nicely lovely few feet of snow in there. At that point, certain parts of the penstock are inaccessible, and so we do get back to it as soon as and the weather has allowed us to get back in there. The pressure flow, differential flow devices, the things that operate the emergency stops, so to speak, for the penstock. During our outage, we test and calibrate those every year. And all this maintenance and all that is outlined in our SOP and as directed by FERC. And we are currently just going through revising our SOPs on this, and that will be done this year. And so we're working steadily to get that done. Some of the challenges that have occurred. In 1924 and 1943, there was a rupture on the high pressure side, on the hammer forged steel. In 1993, that is where the nozzle body, and I got a picture later on, I'll show you what that looks like. But there was a failure in that due to a casting flaw that allowed the powerhouse to flood. And then in 96, as a result of that rupture in 93, the nozzle bodies, the governors, and the hydraulic pressure units were replaced, and the jet deflectors were installed to help minimize or to prevent that from occurring again. And then in 2016 and 2017, on the low pressure side, we had some minor leaks on the dressers, and I'll show you a picture here in a minute what that entailed and what a dresser looks like. It's not something in your bedroom.
I have a question.
I would just, Carrie, just wanted to make sure that we point out that those,
Could you speak into the microphone?
Prior to 96, those were PG&E's responsibility.
Correct. Yes. So again, some of the upgrades that have occurred with the penstock. The wood stays in the penstock and the tunnel were all replaced in 1986, and then that tunnel was backfilled with concrete. Most of it, there's still a little bit, but I'll show you some pictures of that. In 96, on the inverted siphon, we have one small section, there's an inverted siphon. The wood stays were replaced in a 60-inch spiral welded pipe. were done, as well as relining the interior high-pressure section. 2003, the majority of the low-pressure section was relined. In 2019, high-pressure drain valve was replaced. Last year, we reworked the needle assembly on unit number 1. And then this year, we got the wood covers for the air relief valves completed. So this is the tunnel section I was talking about. You can see where they backfilled that with concrete. They stuck a pipe in there and then just slowly grouted that back in. You can see a little bit of the upper part. There's still a little bit, some of it exposed, but it's been closed off. This is the dresser right here. It connects a couple of pipes together, allows for expansion and during heat and stuff like that. And so there's bolts all around that, and that's where we had the leaks. And so we go, again, during that outage, we're in there checking those, tightening the bows, but we did have one, and like I said, in 2016 and 2017, where we had to go back out and retighten them. There's a gasket that lies in between that seals that off. So, and this is the wood covers that we have on the air relief valves. That is preventing the freezing during the winter so that those valves operate and function properly. All right. There we go. Some of the capital improvement projects that we have right now. 1810 is the one. Okay. There we go. I don't know what's with the mouth. Let me see if it'll.
There.
It is sensitive. Don't breathe. Okay. 1810 was the penstock stabilization project. That's the one that really kicked off our assessment. This assessment kind of went over the whole penstock, came up with some of these other future projects that we have, and that assessment report was supplied to FERC in 2019. As a result of that assessment, we have the penstock drainage and erosion control, also some pictures with that, and then also some additional work with regarding to the turbine and the runners and the nozzles and stuff like that. And we got some good information out of that one. So we'll be talking about that. All these projects right now are currently in deferment due to limited fiscal and staffing resources. And FERC was notified of this as late as December of 24. So they're aware of this. And there's nothing on it that we're in the have to do right now, but they're things that we need to do. So this is some of the stuff that came out of that assessment. You can see on the left the rock fall that we have some certain areas on the steep that we need to get some netting and various things to control that rock fall. In order to get to that, though, we need to fix some of the pressure, the erosion that has occurred on that right picture, and to be able to get the equipment in. And so there's various things that we're working through. Plans are already in process for that, how to get equipment through, what the remediations that we need to do. So all that is ready and set. This is the high pressure side. This picture is the same picture, one looking down the hill and the one looking up the hill. So some of the erosion that we need to get permanently fixed with this. We've got some Band-Aids on it and they're functioning, but we need to step them up a bit.
This is like our wooden plumes.
Yes, on our scale from about 1 to 10 that we use for our wooden plumes, these are 7 and 8s. We have some flumes that are definitely in the 9s.
Okay.
And so, you know, we systematically go through our assessment reports, and we've getting through, and we're working to do some further assessments as we go.
The old tramway, we could turn that into an e-ticket.
For those of us that don't know what that is, yes. And most of it is in pretty good condition and working, except for this section right here. This is, you can see that the buttress is, you know, getting exposed on here, but this tram section right here is actually up in the air. And this is the bifurcation. So this right now is a 42-inch pipe coming down on the high pressure side. We then come to our bifurcation point where we split it in for the 2 runners. These are 24-inch pipes. This is our steepest section right here. To do any work on this section, we're typically have our staff on ropes to do that. We have plans to put a stairway in on this to allow inspections. And this is the third floor of the powerhouse that we're standing on right there.
And that third floor is actually PG&E property, right?
Correct. Yes, yeah, that is their
nowhere.
operations, yes. This is the needle assembly right here. That needle is on the right. So the way the water flows, let me see if this will work. Water comes down right here, comes out the needle. This is the Pelton wheel right here. 830 PSI is what it takes to get that to start moving. This needle can move in and out. This is the hydraulic ram that controls that needle. And so this is the work that we just did this last year. Was we redid the surfaces of this needle and did a little bit on the stems. There's a piece that screws in that connects this needle assembly to the ram. And so that was reworked. And then we've got some additional work to do. The needles have a little play in them, so they don't seal as likely as we like them to on the bushings. Some additional work that we need to get done with that. Some of the positive things is we did get a good news on our Pelton wheel, that those are in good shape for their age. These were redone, I believe, 1950s, I believe, is when they were redone. So that was some good news, and we're getting some templates made for those so that we can, when we refurb them, we can refurb them back to the original conditions.
At one point, Carrie, I think you told me we were looking at purchasing a spare Pelton wheel.
Yeah, I don't know if we have that on the thing with that report that we got with the condition. We can definitely consider that, but right now, with all the other things that we have, if something were to happen to that wheel, yeah, it's probably a year or two before you get a new one made.
If you can find a vendor to make one.
I think we got places, the vendors, there are some. I was at the Clean Currents conference a few years ago, and there was a vendor, and I can't remember, it's in a country in Europe that has these, but it's, you know, it's time.
Don't go to Pelton Wheels or Us.
Maybe that's a company that we can start.
I have a friend who's got a fishing lodge up in Alaska. Who's actually put by Pop Grunning, the last territorial governor up there. Their Pelton wheel has been going for over 100 years. I mean, it's like very few moving parts. It's amazing how long these things last.
No, it's a very efficient. They've been around for centuries to move things. I mean, a mill is kind of the same type of thing, right? You know, it's just water hitting something and moving it. And so, the technology's definitely played itself out. So looking ahead, what we can expect, as with the same thing with the Oroville Dam, we would expect some additional scrutiny from FERC with regard to our penstock. That's a natural evolution of where we would think we would go. We will keep the board informed, obviously, as we go down that road, and also with any of our budget changes and capital improvement projects, we'll be before the board for any of those projects as well, as they come up.
Carrie, any lessons learned from the Yuba incident that you?
I have not yet seen that report come out. There's still a lot of speculation, but I would imagine it's going to be still a number of months before we actually hear what the cause of the Colgate penstock was. So no, right now anything that we would say is just anything else you'd find in the news right now is just speculation.
And with the SMUD plant right across the river, what do you have interaction with the SMUD plant? You know, much?
Not operationally, but they're just down the road from us, and we do definitely work together on several things, especially on the maintenance side with roads and items like that, the power lines. But yeah, mostly it's on the operation side of just making sure that we're all together and keep things. I know we collaborate on some of our stream gauge measurements. We can borrow equipment from theirs when ours breaks down and vice versa. So,
thank you.
Any other questions from board members? I want to thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
out of concern, of course, with the Yuba Water District's problem on their recent event. There's always concern from board of directors to know, because those questions do come from a lot of our newer water residents who don't understand the complexity of how we deliver water to their tap. So it's really important for us to be refreshed on these things. It's been a while since Director Dwyer and I took that trip to the powerhouse. I don't think I'll ever go on it again. I love the pictures. We can do it in movie form, but it was anybody who likes going on very, very small roads and finally getting there is like, it's a big deal.
It's an e-ticket.
It's more than an e-ticket.
It can be an e-ticket ride, definitely.
It's no different than when we took the roads up onto the Calder Fire, you know, and people in our El Dorado Hills and our Cameron Park and our area need to understand that it's complexity of that water getting to and also supplying the water into the American River with power industry is fundamentally an important part. And our employees are well versed in this, as most of the Mountain County Water Agency employees. So it's always an amazing to me. I mean, the issue with the needle, I mean, what comes to my mind is always in the news in the Bay Area as they talk about this light bulb that's been on for 110 years in Livermore somewhere. And, or I think that's where it was. And it's never gone off. So it's like, okay, this is still working. Nobody's going to turn off the power or nobody's going to touch the light bulb. But in this case, you know, we're maintaining it and we're doing our due diligence. So I really appreciate it. And it's good refreshment for all of us to understand the importance of that part of our facilities.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'd just like to point out that Project 184, I think, was a very good decision on the part of the district to purchase that from PG&E, because not only did it come with the infrastructure and the forebay and came with a lot of headaches, but it also came with a lot of benefits. And probably the number one benefit is the water rights associated with Project 184 that, to my mind, really allows us to use that water twice. Once to generate power, and then again to pump it out of Folsom Lake and distribute it as beneficial use to our customers. So I think it's a good project. We just need to baby it, take care of it, keep it going, crutch it together, I guess, until we can set aside enough funds to do a major overhaul.
Thank you.
Would you like me to take public comment on this item?
Please do.
We're now taking public comment on informational item 10 regarding the penstock. We will first take any public comment from the room. And if anyone participating virtually would like to comment regarding informational item 10, please follow the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. And President Anzini, it does not appear that anyone is wishing to speak on informational item 10. I believe we are now ready to move to informational item 11.
Thank you. We'll listen from our general manager.
Good morning, board members. My name is Pravani Vandya. I'm the General Manager for El Dorado Irrigation District, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the cost of service analysis timeline. Represented on the slide are previous board items, board action that was taken related to a 2023 cost of service report and approval of increases that changed the rates. And then in 2025 and this year, we've engaged in the board adopting the 2026 through 2030 capital improvement plan, and then adopting the 25 through 26 mid-cycle operating and capital budget, and the 2026 through 2030 financial plan. On February 23rd, 2026, the board awarded a contract to Water Resources Economics to conduct a cost of service analysis. So a comprehensive cost of service analysis is needed for 2028 in order to develop cost-based, equitable and fair water, wastewater, and recycled water rates to support the operating and capital needs of the district. As you're all aware, we have cost increases that are becoming more and more challenging for us to be able to meet with existing rates for those future years. A contract was awarded to do a cost of service analysis with Water Resources Economics, and we're moving forward with that. The cost of service analysis is a process that we engage in order to develop rates that meet but do not exceed the costs required to provide services. We follow Proposition 218 very closely to establish requirements when we consider increases of water, wastewater, and recycled water rates. The district is conducting this cost of service analysis to ensure that we do comply with the Prop 218 requirements. The next couple of slides cover the schedule that we'll engage in. We performed a public workshop on March 3rd. This information item is being presented to the board on the timeline. We will engage in the cost of service analysis during the next period of time, and I will provide monthly updates to the board as we progress through that. We will develop the cost of service analysis as well as potential rates, and that will happen in the March through May timeline. We will engage in public meetings and workshops during June. We will present a rate study report that will be developed, and we will draft Proposition 218 notices that will be presented to the board on July of 2026. The board will receive and file the rate study and approve the 218 notices to the public. August 24th is when we plan to bring it forward. Prop 218 notices will be mailed to the public in August, and then we will follow the Prop 218 validation period, which runs from August through October. During that time period, we will engage in additional public meetings and workshops to discuss the cost of service study with members of the public and what the proposed rate adjustments are going to be. There will be a public rate hearing scheduled for October 26th, and then we will have a 27 through 28 operating budget public workshop on October 26th as well. And then on November 9th, the board will adopt the 27 through 28 operating budget. That is the timeline that we're looking at for this next year. We will be engaging in customer outreach. I think this is the most critical part of us engaging in a cost of service analysis and proposing potential rate adjustments. We have to ensure that we're being as transparent as we can be with members of the public. So that means scheduling public hearings throughout to ensure that we're connecting and taking feedback from the public. We will also engage through projects that include media communication, social media, and also posting on our traditional communication avenues. So the district website, our waterfront newsletter, email subscription, local print media, along with Facebook, as well as Nextdoor, to try to reach as many of our customers as we can. We also are in the process of developing a dedicated web page that will be located on the district's website that will focus specifically on the cost of service analysis and be updated on a regular basis as we make progress. That concludes my presentation to you, and I am available for questions.
Any questions from the board? Yes, Director Day.
Not questions, I just have a comment. I just wanted to read a statement because sometimes when I prepare my statements so I don't go sideways and start rambling, which I know I can do sometimes. But I just wanted this to go on the record that, well, first, it's an ambitious schedule, a lot of work to be done by everybody, and just a side comment that when we do those updates, I hope they can be more interactive with the board and our consultant and staff, and obviously the public participation if they want to, of give and take, and not just the board being told what's happening. So I'd like to see some more interactive efforts with the board. Some notes: all customers should be included in the cost of service study, including the city of Placerville, which inexplicably has not been included in past cost of service studies. When I look at the recycled water numbers, they just don't add up for me. And I think we really need to take a hard look at our cost assignments, top to bottom, to figure out our true cost of recycle. We add a lot of potable water to the recycle system to keep it working. Are we fully assigning those costs? Labor, water tank reconstruction and recoating, debt service, or, for instance, how about the upcoming very expensive $175 million to $200 million El Dorado Hills water treatment plant? If a good portion of that water that it produces is used to supplement recycle, will we be proportionally assigning those costs to recycle? My biggest hope is, in order for us to legally and ethically be transparent, we need to fairly and proportionally assign all our costs to all our customers, no exceptions or special carve-outs. Now, will we be shocked by some of the results? I think most certainly we will be. But then we can publicly and transparently discuss and debate how we, for instance, reapportion non-rate revenue, such as property taxes, to help or mitigate what we charge ag, for instance, or the city of Placerville, and the pros and cons of doing so. After the grand jury report, which stung a bit, I personally can't approve something I don't reasonably understand and can't reasonably explain to my constituents. And what does that mean? It means we spend as much time as needed in workshops looking at not where every pencil or paper clip is accounted for, but it means understanding the broad strokes of the how and why, especially for big ticket costs such as the many Project 184 projects or the El Dorado Hills treatment plant, how those big ticket costs are being assigned, and equally important, how and why some costs are not. What I'm personally looking for is much more time spent educating the board and consequently the public on the hows and whys of this process, and for far greater transparency and public discussion of how we allocate these costs or not, and how we may use non-rate revenue to mitigate some rates. All of it above board, transparently, and publicly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. No questions? Maybe we would ask the public to come forward and speak.
We are now seeking public comment on informational item 11 regarding the cost of service. We will first take public comment from anyone in the room wishing to speak. And we will next take public comment from those attending virtually. If you would like to comment regarding informational item 11, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. And it does not appear anyone is wishing to speak regarding informational item 11. I believe we're ready to move on to action item 13.
Okay.
Good morning, Board of Directors and anyone joining us here today and online. My name is Brian Polson. I'm the district's general counsel, and I'm going to introduce today Bob Reeb, the district's lobbyist, to present the district's proposed positions on pending legislation in the California legislature. So, oh, I'm controlling my own slides here. How about that? I don't know. Am I not controlling? Okay. All right. As the board knows, the district staff, in conjunction with our lobbyist Bob Reeb from Reeb Government Relations, develops a proposed slate of bills and recommended positions on those bills that we historically bring to the board each springtime. Sometimes it takes one meeting, sometimes it takes more, but the district typically provides direction to staff on those bills so that the district can be effective in the California legislature. Oh boy. Am I just scrolling here, or what do I? So this year we have 32 bills. All of them are analyzed and described in today's board packet. In the memo that's appended to the staff report. We're not going to go through each and every one of those bills in today's presentation. Instead, Bob Reeb, who I will turn the time over to shortly, will kind of highlight the bills that he wants to talk to the board about, in addition to the related topics such as the budget development and potential propositions. So go ahead to the next slide. These are just generally how we've grouped some of the bills into these categories that are not limited to these categories. And of course, as bills are amended throughout the course of the legislative period, sometimes bills take a turn on different topics that weren't originally anticipated. And so, but this is generally speaking the topics that we're going to be covering in today's presentation. And so with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Reeb.
Thank you. I'm not going to touch. Good morning, Madam President and members of the board. Bob Reeb with Reeb Government Relations. I think we'll just start off with a little bit of snapshot of where the legislature and the governor is focused early in the year. Governor released his January proposed state budget on January the 9th. And in that budget, the Department of Finance indicated that the state was going to have a projected $2.9 billion budget deficit in the general fund by June 30th of 2027. This differed substantially from the Legislative Analyst's Office projection that was released in December of an $18 billion budget deficit. Some of the reasons for that difference reflect the different economic forecasts that they made. For example, the Department of Finance believes that at that time that the stock market and capital gains and state income tax revenue would continue its plane towards increasing, whereas the legislative analysts felt that the AI bubble in the stock market might burst or at least deflate somewhat, and that tax revenues may not be as robust as the Department of Finance indicated. The clear message from the legislature to the administration was, please, we're begging you, don't wait until May revision, which updates the projections for revenues, to tell us how much money we have to work with to produce a state budget. Because when they get a May revision on May the 15th, and they have a June 15th deadline to produce a budget, it gives them 4 weeks to figure out where to cut and where to add, different things like that. And what we've seen in the last number of fiscal years is that they will borrow one time, they'll push back the last payday in the fiscal year to the next day on July 1. They'll, tell the schools that they're going to defer some of the money that they're due under Prop 98, and that's not what anyone wants to do in terms of crafting a reliable budget. They are projecting increased budget deficits the next several fiscal years, upwards potentially of $35 billion. And so when they're looking at that, they're looking also at being able to try and save more money when the revenues are higher, so that the cuts in those bad fiscal years are less. That may require going to the state voters to ask them to modify Proposition 2, also known as the GAN limit, so that more of the one-time revenue increases can be put into that rainy day fund, which is called the Budget Stabilization Account. So the state budget this year, as in the past couple of years, is going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride. We're not going to see any general fund money going into infrastructure in the water resources area, and therefore we're going to be relying on Proposition 4, the climate bond that voters approved in November of 2024. For your district, we're focusing a lot on the dam safety program because that's where we hope to secure 1/2 of the cost of the Silver Lake Dam replacement project. This funding we've been working on with the district for probably 4 years now, maybe 5 years, through the general fund and then later through a $480 million allocation in Proposition 4, knowing back then that Silver Lake Dam would have to be replaced. And so we were successful in getting general fund money. That was taken back when the budget got into trouble, but we were able to secure a lot of funding in this Proposition 4. And so I think the first round of funding will be, proposal will come out this year. But Proposition 4 will be providing money for safe drinking water projects, water recycling projects, brackish water desalination. There's about $3.8 billion in the $10 billion bond that is kind of in the water resources arena in general. And then the other source of funding that we looked to and we monitor is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is where the carbon reduction charges for emitters, carbon emitters, industry, oil refineries, things like that. They buy credits, and that money goes into this Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. It's been around $4± billion a year, and last year the legislature and the governor extended the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and renamed the Cap and Trade program the Cap and Invest program. They established 4 tiers of funding for that fund, and we were, along with other water community, trying to protect the amount of money that went to the Safe and Affordable Investment Fund at the State Water Board to help the disadvantaged communities with their water supply and wastewater systems. Unfortunately, that got put down in the 4th tier. And that program, the SAFER program, expires in 2030. So that's going to be something that the water community at writ large is going to be focusing on and looking at. If the $100 million that comes out of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is not available, the general fund is a backstop through 2030. After that, they're going to have to figure out how to fund this. When SAFER was created, they figured there's about 1 million Californians that lacked accessibility to safe drinking water. That number's come down a little bit. We spent probably a little over $1 billion on projects, but we're still looking at anywhere from 600 to 700,000 Californians that day to day lack access to safe drinking water supply. Yes, sir.
And just, is the majority of that the failing water systems that the money was used to hook up to larger systems? Is that where most of the money went in that, do you know?
No, some of the money went to that, but most of the money went to re-drilling wells down in the San Joaquin Valley that were shallow and were nitrate.
Go past the nitrate Okay.
Right, and to lower the well to access water because of the declining groundwater tables. But some of it's gone to consolidations.
Thank you.
Certainly. Yes, sir.
Bob, do you happen to know, or Rebecca, how many of those 700,000 people that don't have access are in El Dorado County?
I don't believe any are in El Dorado.
Good answer.
Yeah, it's mostly in the San Joaquin Valley and legacy agricultural communities, and then disadvantaged communities, even in Los Angeles Basin, which you wouldn't think of as having challenges for water supply. But down there, there's groundwater contamination from like the Exide battery factory, Vernon. There's perchlorate contamination, and so when that hits the wells, we've got to shut them down. Most recent impacts have been with PFAS contamination, and when the federal government established maximum contaminant level 10 parts per, I think it's trillion, there are now 61 groundwater wells, drinking water wells in the Central Basin that have to have treatment, and that's about $2 to $5 million per well. And if you have one of these small, what I call postage stamp well properties, I mean, they basically fit in this room. There's not room to build a treatment facility there. So you have to take the water in a different pipe, distribution pipe, move it down to some place where you can treat it, and then put it back in the system. That really ratchets up the cost. So that's been a problem down there.
And Exide, what a mess.
Yeah. The water part is pretty much resolved. It's the residential properties and the lead that's really the challenge that we're dealing with. So let me move to the bills. This first one is El Dorado Irrigation District's sponsored bill, AB 1885. One of your assembly members, Heather Hadwick, is the author of the bill. And this bill comes out of the district's experience with the Hidden Lake parcel that has had and has a substantial body of water on there that's used for recreation and enjoyment. The district sought to declare that as surplus land and to sell it, but in doing so, the Surplus Land Act has a lot of different steps that you have to go through. And it tends to be kind of a long, drawn-out process that eats up a lot of staff time. So this bill looks to simplify it by having that type of property be defined as exempt surplus land. And if you have exempt surplus land, it's a much easier, more streamlined process to dispose of that property. Been working with District General Counsel and with some of your neighbors to try and craft, and the California Special Districts Association, try and craft a very narrow exception based on like a common sense, slap on the forehead. Yeah, this isn't a parcel that we could have affordable housing on. So we attempted to do that when the bill was introduced. We got really significant pushback from the policy committee consultants in the Assembly. So I've gone back to the drawing board, trying to narrow it down. And in the process of doing this research on this issue, which this is all kind of new to me, I found just an anomaly that I don't understand. When you are going to dispose of surplus property, you have to notify the Department of Housing and Community Development. And there's a list of interested persons, but there's also the list of housing sponsors. And these housing sponsors have been certified by the Department of Housing and Community Development as people or entities that actually build affordable housing. But there are others that can submit an interest form that have no experience in building housing. And that's what we discovered caught EID up in this lengthy negotiation period, because two interest statements were emailed from entities that had never built one unit of affordable housing. And that automatically triggers a 90-day negotiation period. So we've drafted amendments to try and narrow the bill and address some of the challenges here. We've shared those with, first of all, I shared those with General Counsel. He gave a thumbs up on that. Sent them to Assemblymember Hadwick's staff. They're meeting with her today. And then we hope to be able to get these amendments in print ahead of an April 15th local government committee hearing, followed by April 22nd Housing and Community Development Committee hearing. So, we're recommending a support position. You approved moving this to Aqua's annual planning meeting last fall. So anyway, that's...
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, familiar with the Hidden Lake issues because we watched that happen over a period of 5 years, I think it was. And it was basically an unusual situation, but according to the reports, there was probably several places like that here in El Dorado County. I guess the one question I have is, who in the county are we supposed to announce? You're talking about the housing communities or whatever, but at state level, right? Not at county level?
No, the requirement is to notify cities and counties in where the parcel is located.
Right.
And the Housing Community Development Department that then blasts out that notice of
So I don't remember the Housing of Community Development in El Dorado County participating in that.
I don't know. I wasn't involved in the disposal of that property.
It was kind of, I know you were working on that, but I don't remember El Dorado County being a part of that.
Yeah, in order for the county to express interest, they have to respond to our notice. Just like
and they didn't.
We did get some responses. Bob indicated those, but no, the county never responded with any interest.
Okay.
Primarily because I'm assuming the county recognized that there was no way to build affordable housing on this property.
Well, I would disagree with that opinion, on the county, because maybe they responded because they don't have any idea how to do that, or manage the affordable, or manage the surplus property. Surplus.
Yeah, recall that this particular property was, as Bob indicated, it was dominated by the presence of a lake, so you couldn't build anything on it. And all I'm saying, I have no information about this, but all I'm saying is that I presume that the county did not respond with a letter of intent to negotiate for the purchase of that property because they recognized that there was no way to build anything on that property. The responses that we did get in response were sort of these canned responses from folks that had no intent to build on the property, but just sort of reactively say, oh, yeah, put us in the queue. We want to buy that property.
Okay, so here's a question I have for Bob. I'm only familiar with surplus property at the city level because of my background there and in school board. Surplus property at that one time, and maybe the laws have changed, I'm so old, but that surplus property owned by a public agency must be offered to another public agency first for their benefit. And there's a 90-day, whatever. And I'm only familiar with this based on the principles of what the city of Pittsburgh School District did. They had property. Nobody wanted to buy it. So a company came in and bought it and made a great big supermarket. And the owner, it was like this is when bond measures and things were not working. So it was an outside entity that came in and offered the money. They built it and then stopped payment to the school district. What happened is, as they stopped payment, they ended up defaulting, and the property, even though they had paid $1.2 million, the property went back to the school district to sell again. So I know that there were laws that were followed, but I see the concern, for local agencies to be able to sell their property, but isn't the priority is for other public agencies or community organizations rather than a developer?
Short answer is yes. The law changed in 2019, so I don't know how far back.
You're going way back for me.
Okay, so what you described is pre-2019 when the law was changed.
Okay.
Surplus Land Act was enacted in 2019. There's been subsequent amendments. It's interesting, when I look at a law that takes effect, and then after that takes effect, there are bills that follow in the legislature to add 19 examples of what's exempt from the Surplus Land Act. What we're proposing here is to add another exemption to the Surplus Land Act. So this exempt surplus land is defined in other areas of the Act that have a more streamlined, like some of them, like there's a street that is abandoned that you can sell to or transfer to the adjoining property owner. There's like military base. There's different things that are exempt surplus. But yes, you still have to offer it to local public agencies and housing, local housing. Before it was redevelopment agencies. They're no longer around. But then at the same time, the law requires you to put a notice of availability on the Housing and Community Development Department's web page, and that's where housing sponsors and other interested persons receive that notice. And then they have 60 days to respond to the local agency and said, yes, I'm interested in purchasing that property for affordable housing. And then if you receive that notice, you have 90 days to have good faith negotiations for that purchase. So it can be El Dorado Housing Coalition, it can be a developer from Sacramento, it could be Habitat for Humanity, self-help enterprises, whomever would be interested in building affordable housing on that parcel would have that 90-day period to negotiate.
So I guess one more statement, and I'll shut up, but I'll let other board members speak on this. About 9 years ago, there was property that we had, and I know that EID sold property called Mountain Barkley or something like that was up on Highway 50, or was it? Yeah, it was up on 50. There was a piece of property that was an old reservoir, and because we didn't want to maintain it, EID didn't want to maintain it, they put it out for sale, and it ended up being bought by an individual who ended up taking on the liability. And I understand surplus is really important for us to get rid of if there's liability cost to it. That's most important. And that was personally purchased by somebody local who fixed it up, and it became a resort. And either they removed the dam or they reestablished it. But it was a personal developer or a single person who bought it. And it seemed to many, they thought it was maybe a inside deal. And I think we have to be real cautious about what we do with our surplus land, either to conservation or to reduce our liability, but not just hand it over to anybody who wants to come in and make $1 million off of a sale that was sold for $100,000.
Wasn't it the adjacent property owner that bought it?
Yeah, that's correct. I think you're referring to the Blakely Reservoir.
Blakely, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and there were a number of public presentations given here at the board meetings about why it was that the property was declared surplus.
Right.
That happened pre-enactment of the Surplus Lands Act in 2019. So we followed instead the prior process, which you described, which was to notice the county, cities. For purposes of development of affordable housing, because even prior to the Surplus Lands Act, there was still that requirement, which you alluded to. The district complied with those statutes. There was no interest, unfortunately. I mean, we would have loved to have marketed that property.
I know.
Yeah. But ultimately, we ended up selling it to the adjacent neighbor, who
fixed it up and sold it again or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to it after that point, but.
Okay, he didn't. Okay, well, I'm my mistake. I'm not accusing anybody of, but those are the things that I perceived before I got on the board, and then it wasn't clear anyway. But dealing with surplus property is so important, and we may not have some good pieces, that are out there that are available, but it certainly seems that if we remove the exemption, it might make it easier to remove our liabilities in places.
Yeah, on parcels that are clearly unsuitable for affordable housing development.
Thank you.
So, I spent several hours on this packet, and it was both very interesting and very tedious, as those things tend to be. And at this point, I am not prepared to vote on this packet, just because what I got was in the packet. On this topic, I didn't get a chance to review this until yesterday because, as I mentioned, I was down in Jamestown. But I reached out to members of both the economic development community here in town and the housing community, and they had serious concerns about the language here, some vagueness that needs to be addressed, and I'll be happy to share with council that we can have further discussions on this. And I appreciate, the need for common sense and a simplified approach. But I want to make sure that the concerns of the local community are addressed as this evolves. And especially since we finally have an idea of what properties we do own within EID, and I think we really need to take a thoughtful approach to how we, both retain and dispose of those surplus properties. So hopefully, the Assembly member is willing to, work with us to address some of the issues that have been brought up. But again, a lot of very interesting stuff in there. But on this one, especially, I'm not ready to move forward, even though it's considered an EID-sponsored bill. So,
okay. All right. Moving on to the next slide.
I just a quick, I'm sorry, Bob.
Yes.
Just a quick comment, because, I've been a supporter of this. I think Brian's proposal is very based in common sense and straightforward. I guess I shouldn't be, but I am surprised at the pushback and the reactions and the machinations of stuff. At some point, I guess continue to pursue, but at what point do we say it's not worth expending the energy or the money on it, even though it's seemingly very simple?
Well, I've been a lobbyist now for 31 years, and I still don't know what's going to fly and what's going to, get shot down before the first hearing. This one, I thought, this is just knock yourself in the forehead and say, well, yeah, this makes sense. But no, we haven't really even gotten to, the bill's been in print now for 30 days, or a little more than 30 days. So, but we've been dealing with the policy committee consultants on this. Because of that, we are rewriting the bill to kind of narrow it down based on the meetings that we've had with the committee consultants. They said, look, we understand, we get it, we want affordable housing where we can build it. And we said, yes, we agree. But if you have a parcel like this where you can't build affordable housing, or you have a parcel that's in a jurisdictional wetland, or you've got a unstable slope that's experienced, landslides over the last 10,000 years, you probably don't want to put people there. And so that's where we're trying to find the neat middle here. We're certainly not trying to exclude buildable property that's suitable for housing development. So you've got kind of these two extremes, and we're working really hard to find that sweet spot in the middle. If we can't do that, and it goes sideways on us, we already have agreement, at least at the staff level, and with Assemblymember Hadwick, that we're not going to push, a dead elephant up the hill here. we're gonna take a time out. The legislature comes back in session again in December with a new thing, and we'll work on it. But we're not. The goal here is not to harm the interests of affordable housing in California. The goal here is to streamline it so the water districts don't get hammered with unnecessary bureaucratic things that cost your staff a lot of time and energy to deal with. When it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Liability.
And,
Yeah.
and that attempt is laudable. So, and again, I'd be happy to share with that and hopefully engage to identify this. And I was hoping to do this beforehand, but timing got away.
Yeah, well, intent and $4.50 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Really?
Okay, moving on. So we've kind of lumped these into fire risk and emergency planning. This first bill, AB 2013 by Assemblymember Bennett, would require every water system that serves more than 100 connections or I think it's connections, to include in their emergency preparedness plan a lot of detail with respect to emergency power generation, lift stations, keeping your tanks filled, and what have you. Problem here is you already have to do it under federal law since 2013. And the level of granular detail that the Assembly member is seeking is likely not appropriate in terms of it's as if the member believes that you're not doing anything, that you're not understanding that a power supply shut off means that you may have to move generation here and do that. So we're recommending a not favor unless amended. I think the plans that he has, that he's envisioning have merit for those that serve less than 3,300 customers. That's the cutoff in the federal law that you already do your emergency plans. So not favor unless amended because we don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel that you've already built here. The next bill, AB 2472, similar. This would have a new plan called a catastrophic plan. So we have your emergency preparedness plan that you already do, but now we have this catastrophic plan that you'd have to write. We're not sure that's necessary, so we're asking for a not favor unless amended here to remove that requirement for water. The committee has a range of these catastrophic plans that are enumerated in the bill. We don't think water is necessary given existing requirements. SB 1153 by Senator Caballero. This bill is sponsored by the Association of California Water Agencies. Your Deputy Senior General Counsel Extraordinaire, worked on this with ACWA's Legal Affairs Committee and a work group that included some of the state legislative committee members. The goal here is to have some of the disaster preparedness planning that you already have to do enumerated or set forth in statute, and to add language in statute that would guide the courts when they're looking at litigation against a water district for damages caused by a wildfire. Mm-hmm. So, not to go in too much detail, but under the California and United States Constitutions, there's this legal thing called takings. And you can't take property without compensating that property owner. Well, this is kind of a strict here I'm getting my Cracker Jack law degree. This is a strict liability standard. And so when wildfire goes through areas and wipes out homes and communities, water districts are getting sued under this takings clause because they are contributing to the taking of that property by not having an adequate, and the defense or the plaintiffs, the water systems aren't adequate to fight a wildfire. Well, they were never designed to do so, and they're really incapable of doing so. It's just financially infeasible and probably operationally infeasible too. So this bill, you can't amend, you could try and amend the Constitution, but you'd have to amend the federal Constitution as well. So what this is doing is it's trying to follow, kind of like in the footsteps of the Prop 218 Implementation Act, where the legislature interprets the Constitution, and again, to provide some tests or things for the court to look at. Consider, is the water system, the fire hydrant, supposed to put out a wall of fire being blown at 85 miles per hour? and hopefully the court will say, well, no, that's not the design or the intent for that system, so it can't be held liable for the loss of that property. Recommended support position on that. The next bill, SB 1417, this is by Senator Perez. She represents the Altadena, Pasadena area, and down in that area, this is where the Eaton fire occurred in January 2025, and you have 5 or 6 water systems that serve kind of that fire damage area, including the Rubio Canyon Land and Water Company, Lincoln Avenue Water Company, then you've got the City of Pasadena, City of Sierra Madre. But here, that wildfire, as we all know, just completely overwhelmed the ability for firefighters and the water systems to stop that fire. So she's responding by requiring, again, more disaster preparedness in terms of really designing the system that could put out that Eaton wildfire. So we're recommending a not favor unless amended on this. Again, I think she's focused on the small companies, mutual water companies, to make sure that they have adequate planning and a forethought to what would happen in a wildfire for their system. And so I think what we're going to try and do is narrow the bill so it doesn't include entities like El Dorado Irrigation District.
So as a career emergency manager, I read these with great interest, but I also reflected back to our warrant report in that we are updating our district emergency plan. And so one thing I would ask is to get an update on that process. And having written many emergency plans, and I think, as Bob kind of indicated, they get bogged down with such such detail that they become useless. So I would like to look at where our emergency plan is going, and in context of if some of these come through, to get ahead of that. And just to give an example, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, required public health systems to come out with a new plan for each new variant of influenza. H5s, H7, and 2, and it would make me crazy because you didn't change your response. You look at the characteristics that make things hazardous, and you deal with that. And if you have more and more stuff, the plan itself becomes useless. And I'm a big believer in having the practical things you need during a disaster in one volume and all the administrivia somewhere else, because you don't want to be going through 10,000 pages. And in anticipation that some of these may pass, if we can get ahead of it, we're probably going to be better off. So I just kind of was, as I was reading the packet, I was reading your stuff and looking at our warrant, I think I would love to see a presentation on that and just to track these. So thank you.
If I could just add,
Sure.
I appreciate the enthusiasm for understanding where we're at with our plans and where we're going. However, I must point out that a lot of that information is confidential for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So we will figure out how we can update the board members on where we're at without sharing too much information. So it's sort of a delicate
I understand. I've lived in that world.
Okay, next slide. This group of bills we've put under the heading of water rates and water rights. This first bill, AB 2180, also sponsored by the Association of California Water Agencies. This would amend the Proposition 218 Omnibus Implementation Act. This is the legislative enactment that followed after the passage of Prop 218 in 1996. And it set forth some of the details of how you deal with just kind of very basic requirements in Prop 218. There's been a lot of litigation on Prop 218. I mean, really starting there soon thereafter and going through last year. And one of the focuses has always been on proportional cost of service. And you understand all of this. But back in the 1990s, California pivoted a bit towards tiered rate structures with a goal of encouraging water conservation. So the notion was, instead of just a uniform flat rate, you'd charge customers under, say, a 5-tiered rate structure, where the more water you use, the greater cost increment would inure to that. Well, under Prop 218, those costs have to reflect the reasonable cost of providing that service, and they have to be proportional. So what the courts were forced to look at through litigation was, what's the rational basis for determining that 4th or 5th tier? In other words, does it cost the water system any more to provide the 2nd tier, the 3rd tier, 4th, 5th? And what the courts found is, no, the districts are they're going for water conservation. Send the economic signal, you shouldn't be, using that much water. And the courts said that failed the Prop 218 tests. So this bill seeks to identify the means for you to continue a tiered rate structure consistent with those court decisions. And in doing so, the goal here is to try and shield or reduce the exposure to litigation on a tiered rate structure in California. So we're recommending a favor position on this. AB 2218 would add a state policy to the water code relating to California Native American tribes. And we're recommending an opposed position, not because we don't recognize the atrocities and the harm that was caused and imposed on California Native American peoples when, California settled. However, this bill introduces a state policy that would apply to all state agencies and require, whenever they revise, review, or adopt a policy, regulation, rule, it's very broad, that state entity would have to consider whether California Native American tribe would benefit from changing that, either through compensation or a reallocation of resources. So for a water right, for example, when the El Dorado Irrigation District either moves to take that permit to a license, or as you've done amended your water rights permits to change the point of diversion, moving water from up in the Upper American River Project down to Folsom. So all of those now would be open to this policy of introducing, should El Dorado Irrigation District still have the 15,080 acre feet, or should it be 14,000 acre feet and some of that water go to benefit, tribe A or what have you. Very broad policy. We're recommending an opposed position because of the threat it poses to the district and its ratepayers and taxpayers, but also because there are other laws in the water arena that provide the ability and the requirement for the State Water Resources Control Board and EID to engage in government-to-government consultation with the California Native American tribe. Under CEQA, for example, if you're doing a project that may affect a cultural resource or a religious resource or a site, you're required to engage in government-to-government consultations to try and avoid that impact or mitigate for it. In the water rights, the current Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, the state board has a policy that they also have to engage in government-to-government consultation, and in fact, they have included tribal water use under the beneficial uses that Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan is intended to protect. So there are multiple procedures and laws that provide meaningful engagement and requirements to mitigate or avoid. This could get into the compensation or taking away some of the water rights that you have here. We're recommending an opposed position. And I would say that I've been participating. There's a lot of aqua work groups. I've got like 5 or 6 that I'm working with, and other members of the regulated community. And we've engaged with the author on this bill to see if there's amendments, to see if we could work together. And they're pretty hard and fast that this is what they want. So we're not recommending oppose unless amended, but we're just saying oppose the bill. The final one on this slide is AB 2630 by Assemblymember Bennett. He wants to, in effect, allow for any regulations that the State Water Resources Control Board enacts or adopts in the areas of water diversion and water use. He wants just to make those emergency regulations now and forevermore. Emergency regulations under the Administrative Procedures Act are for emergencies, and they are only allowed to be in effect for 180 days. After that, you've got to come back with regulations and go through the public process, have them reviewed by the Office of Administrative Law. If the regulation would impact the state economy by $50 million or more, has to be analyzed by the Department of Finance. This bill would just wipe that all away and say, if the board wants to do a regulation on water diversion, measurement, or use, it's an emergency regulation. There's really very little public input. So we're recommending an opposed position on this. We think openness, transparency, and the ability for water right holders to engage the water board in a quasi-judicial process, that's important to keep. This bill, SB 101, this is a miscellaneous. This bill, SB 1001, this is one of our clients' sponsored bills. And what it looks to do is to create a identification card that's a personal identification and verification interoperable card. And the federal government, through the Department of Homeland Security, through the National Incident Management System, has a template for an identification card that's secure. It actually has an RFID chip on there that can be read to say, yes, Director Penn, he's Director Penn, and he has, he's a water treatment operator 5, and he's legit. What has been experienced since 2017, 2018, up and down California, is water district personnel in their uniform and their EID truck with their EID employee badge have said, we need to have access to move this portable emergency power generator so that the lift station that's moving wastewater or water up to a storage tank, that we can get into this area when it's safe to do so, when the incident commander deems it safe for entry. Utility workers are getting turned away. And we've seen it in the Paradise fire. We've seen it in the Caldor fire between Lucan's brothers, and El Dorado Irrigation District even had a challenge at one entry point. The Eaton fire and the Palisades fire really brought this forward. There's 200 public water systems in LA County alone. And our clients are part of a 21 member mutual aid agreement. And so this Rubio Canyon Water Company said, we got a problem, we need help. They needed diesel brought in to keep those generators full. They needed crews to come in and shut off water, because when you have 500 homes burned, the water just runs, right? And that affects water pressure in the water hydrants. It affects their ability to refill storage tanks so that the firefighters can actually fight the fire to the extent the system will allow. So this bill would task the California Office of Emergency Services to make this PIVI card available upon request from utilities, electric, water, gas, what have you, that it would be a standard ID, federal ID, that would be more easily recognizable by the law enforcement entities that are guarding those entry points. The bill would delay the application of those, for those ID cards and for 18 months to give Cal OES and the County Emergency Operations Centers the ability to kind of staff up and understand what these are and how they would work. The 1001 is the zip code is of Altadena is 91001. So that's the little hook for that bill there. But we're recommending a support position on this bill.
I have a question on this one,
Yes, sir.
Bob, though, because it seems to me it's not really solving the problem, because the problem was that the law enforcement and whatnot just were turning people away because they had no instructions to do otherwise. Having a fancier ID is not going to change that.
That's a great point, and you're correct. So there's two sides of this coin. There's having something that's easily recognizable. Yeah, so like some of the districts have cards, and in the back it has the disaster service worker definition under the government code, and they say, look, we're a disaster service worker under the government code, but there's multiple challenges. One, you could be 4 or 5 counties away from your county. And so you show El Dorado Irrigation District in, let's just say there was an earthquake that, wiped out the Bay Area, and there was a call, hey, we need water district to come down. So you show the El Dorado Irrigation District, and well, you're not East Bay Mud. What do you hear? But yes, there's a breakdown between the Emergency Operations Center and the Emergency Support Functions desk, and understanding how many the different water utilities, electric utilities, gas utilities, and communicating from the EOC to each of the law enforcement entities. Sometimes you got a National Guard person from Cottonwood, California, that's down in Los Angeles. And so the goal of the card is, though, it's standardized and it's recognizable, it's easy to train to look for that card. But we still have to solve the EOC communications between the EOC and the law enforcement entities. I can't write a bill to solve that, but that's why we're proposing this 18-month time frame between, if the bill gets signed into law, it takes effect January of 2027. But no one can apply for these cards until July of 2028. So hopefully in that 18 months, someone gets their act together. But
I'd like to, I think Director Day pointed out that, since I've been a director, I've never had to use it, of course. I know a couple others who have, but, this just doesn't doesn't even say my name on it.
Or have your picture on it.
Yeah, and it's not that I'm for this. I would actually say this has to be really looked at because of the where it's coming from, because of the lack of one water agency that might have not taken care of the business and et cetera. But my biggest concern is when you're using an RIF or a chip, who's monitoring that? How is that going to be monitored on a day-to-day basis or month-to-month basis? When an employee leaves, who turns that off? Who turns it on? Who's going to be doing that? There's a lot of AI involved with this, and I really think we have to think about what it's going to impact on emergency situations when we just need people there. And to stop people from maybe infiltration of a virus that is sent into that system, because there's no way anything with the computer generation is going to be monitored or it's going to be hacked. And my biggest concern is currently what's working for us has been fairly good, but to participate in this nationwide thing on monitoring our employees, I'm not approval. I'm not in for that.
Yeah.
So unless it's amended and that water agencies are the ones who are responsible to turn those off and on, that is the only thing that I would be supportive of.
And the bill provides that.
Right.
The bill requires well, I wrote it, so I can.
Okay.
The bill requires.
The
bill requires.
I know.
Yeah, the bill requires.
I want him to do it. He's earning his income here.
Yeah, the bill requires the utility to collect the card from, let's say, the employee retires or fired or what have you.
And how much is that going to cost per water agency?
You know, I can't answer that right now.
Mm-hmm.
A driver's license costs you, I think, $35. You can't drive. I mean, when you get pulled over, you pull out your driver's license, has your picture on there, the date and your address and things like that. The first question they ask is, I had a headlight out, so I got pulled over here last night. But is this still your address? Yes, sir, it is. And anyway, yeah, the bill has a lot of safeguards in there. Number one is that it's not mandated. The utility, so El Dorado Irrigation District would have to submit the request to Cali OES. It would have to have an application for each employee, and it have to identify the employee, the certification for that employee, picture, everything would have to go. The cybersecurity threat, yeah, I don't know how to solve that. This is, you know, it's the Department of Homeland Security, so can they be hacked? I'm sure everybody can be hacked, but we can't. Yeah, at some point you got to trust that the people who are running those systems and cybersecurity will take care of it. But that's I'm a political science major, so what do I know?
Yeah. This is one I support strongly, and so from 2014 to 2018, I ran the emergency management program for Cali, PA, including all the boards, departments, and offices, including the water board. And I think it was in 2017, during the Tubbs fire, when utility workers came up to a checkpoint. There was a deputy from out of the area because PC 832, they took anyone that was authorized to carry a gun and a badge, was staffing that checkpoint and said, no go. And so I'm working the State Operations Center, and we needed those people in there to do the work. And because I was the agency representative and also responsible for emergency support function 10, working with 8, complicated.
Yeah.
But the point is, we had to go over to the law enforcement section and say, let these people through. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't have to go through this every time. Mm-hmm. One of the issues is when there is a major event, they're pulling in anyone that's got a badge and a gun, and they're not versed in these activities. I think this is a good start. I understand the concerns, but getting the right people at the right place, the right time to do what needs to be done to protect the public health and safety is paramount. And this is an ongoing issue, and this is one attempt to try to resolve it. So to be commended.
Thank you. Yeah. I've lost the rest of my hair under this.
Yeah, join the club.
Okay, so that's just a snapshot, a brief presentation of, the 32 bills that have position recommendations. There are, I would say I might be back in a month or so because the deadline for getting so-called spot bills amended is upon us, and so we're seeing each day maybe 20 bills that were just placeholders, one sentence, we intend to change this part of the law. Now they're getting substantive amendments. Some of them are going to impact EID, so this is where we are right now.
Okay.
So we are recommending option 1, which is to approve the recommendations of Reeve Government Relations, LLC, as the district's official positions on proposed state legislation.
I'll move for option 1.
I'll second with a question or comment. Since we have Rebecca here and the water agency uses a different legislative consultant.
Yeah.
Are we in sync with the water agency and what we're recommending in this legislation and approving?
Yeah, so we're in communication. In fact, there's a meeting with the team and the water agency team here upcoming. I know Mr. Smith, we're working very closely on AB 1772, which is a golden mussels, invasive mussels bill. I would say that being in sync for me means we're communicating, we know each other's positions and priorities, but of course, EID can't tell the water agency to take position A and they can't do us. So in sync meaning we're communicating, we're aware of what each other's doing. we're quite often on the same position, but it's not always going to be.
I'd like to have us highlight the ones where we're not, because I think it reflects on the whole county. If the water agency says one thing, if the water agency says one thing and EID says something else, that's not a good look.
Yeah.
So I think we need to communicate and resolve those issues prior to taking positions.
Director Dwyer, I'll make a note of that here, and as I indicated in the staff report, as bills change, and we need to take a different direction than the direction that you're providing for today. We'll be back to get that direction. As you all know, sometimes legislation moves very quickly, and there are hearings or deadlines that make it so that there's not time to schedule. And in those instances, I or the general manager will provide direction to our lobbyists consistent with the principles or policies that you've already given to us, but then arrange to present that to the board to kind of get ratification of that. So that's generally how we do. But I'll make an additional note that any time we're taking a position that is inconsistent with the position of the County Water Agency, we will make sure to agendize a board discussion of that.
I haven't been aware of any.
Yeah, I'm not aware of. I don't think that has happened, but if it does, we'll be here.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Okay. There is a motion and a second on approval of the legislative council's recommendations.
Yes, we are now taking public comment regarding action item 13. If anyone in the room would like to make a public comment, or if anyone virtually would like to make a public comment, I do see that we have a commenter online, so bear with me. You'll be prompted that you're allowed to speak, and if you could please state your name for the record. And you should be able to proceed.
Good morning. I was finding my unmute button. My name is Frank Porter, and I'm the Vice President of Housing in El Dorado. I'm also a longtime resident of El Dorado County. I'm a retired school superintendent, and for the last 5 years, I've been working as a volunteer with Housing El Dorado on homeless issues and on affordable housing, which are inextricably tied together. El Dorado County, as you well know, has a severe housing shortage for affordable workforce housing. Actually, one of our most rapidly growing unhoused part of our community is seniors. Interesting fact. And we have a severe shortage of missing middle housing, which many of your employees would qualify for the kind of housing we're trying to get built in El Dorado County. We are not a developer. We work with developers. We work on land issues. We work for advocating for housing. My concern about this legislation, and by the way, my compliments to Mr. Reed and his analysis. I think I read through the analysis he presented, and on the face of it, it makes lots of sense. And I applaud the effort of coming up with common sense decisions and common sense kind of legislative adjustments. As with lots of things, the devil's in the details. And the concern that I hear and I've experienced in this county is that, and I'm not so much worried about EID's surplus property, but I've been through the list of surplus properties, and so far, I haven't found any that look like they're suitable for development, to be candid with you. And we, by the way, analyze projects based on the suitability of the development. There are projects, affordable housing projects that have come into our county that honestly are not good ones, some of them. But there are also lots of very good ones that other agencies in the county often oppose for reasons that I find very troubling and difficult to wrap my head around. And my concern about this legislation is it involves all local agencies, and that, that those agencies across the state could then utilize these exemptions as an excuse, essentially, to remove property, affordable property, or suitable public land for consideration for affordable housing development, when that land, in fact, could be developed into affordable housing. And that without the kind of clarity about, how are you deciding, it claims here the exemption is for properties unsuitable for housing development where building homes is infeasible or impossible. My question is, well, what's the criteria for that? How are you determining that? Because I know full well from my own experience here in El Dorado County that there are agencies in the county involved in planning and governing boards that have turned down properties and scuttled projects on very tenuous lines. And my concern, and a concern as somebody who's really wanting to see a housing built for the people that live and work here, that this modified law could in fact be utilized to frustrate the development of perfectly suitable land for affordable housing without a lot of care and concern on the details of how in fact you're identifying those properties, what's the criteria, and what's the accountability for that. So I would urge you to proceed carefully and get some of those questions answered. I'm sure in the legislative process that will happen to some degree, but again, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anybody else online would like to speak?
There was briefly someone, so I will just request again, if anyone attending virtually would like to speak regarding action item 13, please follow the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. And we do have a member of the public wishing to speak, so I'm going to please proceed.
But no, I just wanted to respond to Director Dwyer, since I know you're on both of our boards, and Mark Smith, our consultant, who's also online, presented at our board last month. I think consistent with what Brian said, we've always, at least my recollection, been in sync with our positions. We don't always take the same position or take positions on all the same bills because some of our roles and responsibilities are different, but where there is overlap, we do.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Are there anybody else online? Okay.
I do not see anyone further wishing to speak regarding action item 13. I believe we're ready for the vote. Would you like me to call the vote?
Yes.
We have a motion to approve action item 13, option 1, approve recommendations of Reeb Government Relations, LLC as the district official positions on proposed state legislation, moved by Director Mansfield and seconded by Director Dwyer. We are now ready for the vote. And we have Directors Dwyer, Mansfield, Anzini, and Day voting aye. Director Penn abstaining. Motion passes. And I do believe we have one review of assignments. Director Penn requested that staff bring an update to the board regarding the update of the emergency response plan, subject to any confidentiality considerations.
All right. So therefore, our board meeting is adjourned.
Adjourned at 11:18.